All right. And I'm going to share my screen in a second. There we go. And that. All right. So tonight we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can within about an hour for this presentation tonight. Hopefully that the slides we have here can help answer some of the questions you've sent to us. And again, please feel free to throw more questions to us in that email address. Again, bpsdreopening@bpsdk12.org. Okay, so here we go. So we've got a lot of questions about, can we move from remote to hybrid? And originally that was our feeling, and that was our thought that we could do that. After looking and building the cohorts, we realized it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to be able to honor that request, moving from remote to hybrid. And the biggest component to that is keeping the 6-foot distancing between desks. So for right now, what we're saying is, if you're remote for now, and we're going to continue to monitor the trajectory of the virus in the community, the state, and our schools. If we see positive trends, and I don't mean positive in cases going up, I mean continue to go down, I think we'll revisit that. And if we can shrink or reduce the 6-foot distancing guidelines to allow more kids back into the building, then we'll have some more conversation and try to do that. But to start off, if you're remote, you're remote. If you want to move from hybrid to remote, that won't be an issue. That'll be easier for us to do. But we're going to really keep an eye on the metrics of the virus within the community in our schools. So if we start seeing some upticks, then we need to start having some discussions between ourselves, our staff, the Board of Health, and then decide, do we stay in hybrid or do we go to full remote? So we're really going to keep an eye on metrics over a period of time. We can't just take one data point and say, all right, everyone can come back in because this week there were no cases. We're going to have to look over a period of time and then make some determination. I really want to see that data. And it's going to be, again, the governor had put out that map that shows us the colors and where we stand. I want to look at the positivity rate within our town, and then also see how our schools are doing. And if we're seeing things positively and we're able to move forward with that, then that's what we'll do and get some kids back, start getting kids back in the building for more in-person learning. So we're going to take it slow. So I know for some, I just want to be clear, I'm not saying no, it's never going to happen. You're going to be remote for the entire year. Really have to be, cognizant of the data and make the best decisions possible as we move forward. So I hope that clears up that question. This was a question that came up. Will kids have mask breaks throughout the day? Yes, they're going to have mask breaks throughout the day. Typically, they'll be outside where there's plenty of fresh air, but they can also be inside, like an area like the gym where there's more spacing. Again, we have to follow the 6-foot distancing guidelines, even during those mask breaks, right? So it's important that in the classrooms they're wearing their masks, again with the 6-foot distancing. But again, our staff is going to build in those mask breaks throughout the day, which will be really helpful for the students and for the staff to be able to take them off for a period of time and go do the things that they need to do and then get back to work in classrooms. So those will be built in. Oops. Will there be a change in dismissal for buses for cleaning between runs? So we are looking, or we have done, is we've changed the bus pickup and drop-off times. So they'll be a little bit different. So we're staggering their times between drop-off and pickup in the mornings and the afternoons. And the purpose is to make sure we have a smooth traffic flow. We want to make sure that we get our buses in quickly and out so they can do their next runs, and also for our parents to be able to get in and get out quickly. Also, students will have their assigned seats on the bus. That way we can be clear on where they're sitting, again, just in case we need to do any contact tracing. And all buses are going to be clean between their runs. So we've actually given our bus company the same product that we use in our schools, and every driver will have a bottle of that so they can sanitize the bus in between runs, and then they do a deeper clean after all the runs are complete. And then obviously Wednesdays, there's no run, so they'll be cleaning them once again. I don't know why it's doing it. I'm sure schools are expecting some uptick in cases. I was wondering, is there a threshold that has to be met before the kids are sent home remotely for a time? So really working with our Board of Health, and I think I mentioned that in that first slide, and reviewing the data from the state, the community, and our schools. So there's been some discussion at the state level around a percentage that if we reach like a 3% positivity rate, then there's going to be discussion about going full remote. But right now, it's really just discussions. I anticipate some more information in the real near future. But I think for us, as an administrative group, we're going to keep an eye on that positivity rate. And if we start seeing upticks and it starts getting towards that 3%, we'll consult the Board of Health and then we'll make a decision. Now, we could see an uptick in one specific school and maybe close that school down for a period of time to go full remote, or we may see it throughout the district. So again, really looking at the data over time and making those decisions that are best for either one school or all of our schools will be important. Again, we just got to take it one step at a time. Currently, I think Bellingham is in the yellow. We were in white just a week or so ago. It's changing from community to community, week by week. So again, so important to look at the data points over time before we make a decision. We're yellow now, we could easily be white a week from now. I've seen communities that were white 1 week and it, turned to red, and then a few days later went back to white. So it's confusing with that map, but everything that I've read is really take some time to read the data and be strategic in what you're looking at. Will the kids, hold on, I can't see that one because my bar is in the way. Will kids be accountable for class attendance? Yes, they will. Their teachers will be taking attendance each day. It's going to be a regular school day with start times and stop times, whether you're in person or you're remote, hybrid remote or full remote. We expect our students to log in, and do the work that's going to be provided to them through their remote learning or when they're in person. So yes, attendance will be taken. Will the teachers actually teach via classes at their allocated time? Yes. We've got a lot of questions around synchronous and asynchronous learning, and Mrs. Rafferty actually has a couple slides later they'll go into a little more detail, but there's going to be, for remote students, there'll be synchronous and asynchronous learning that happens throughout the remote days. So this is just really simplistic, this explanation right here, and there's a lot of different layers to this, but there's going to be live lessons, right? Whether it's like through Google Streaming or Google Meets. There'll be some independent work for kids in that asynchronous learning. This is within one class period. There could be some collaborative time with peers through Google. So the kids that are in person and the kids that are home and remote could collaborate through Google. There's going to be check-ins within those periods with teachers, and then some type of wrap up, whether through Google Meets or Google Chat. So during that period, they're going to be able to go in and out of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Oh, hold on one second. Okay. All right. I hope that explains it. Special ed, Mrs. Lawrence, did you want to talk about that one real quick?
Absolutely, sure. Many questions have been asked around how IEP services and accommodations and modifications will be provided. We are intending to provide services and accommodations as denoted on a student's educational plan. The delivery in which those services and accommodations and modifications may look differently during the hybrid or remote learning days. Pull-out services will be delivered in smaller groups. So if your child was participating, say, in a social skills group, the participants may, instead of being 5, it may be 2 or 3 students, so that we can ensure that we maintain those social distances, especially for the students when they're in the in-person learning sessions. Parents will be provided with a written documentation that's going to describe how these accommodations, modifications, and services will be provided differently in the various learning models. in the Department of Ed, when this PowerPoint was developed a couple of days ago, they were getting ready to release their template for that document, and it came in this morning around 10:30. So I'll be training all of our staff on that documentation and the process to develop this plan. You'll be in contact by your special ed liaison to help the district develop these. They're called COVID-19 special education learning plans. So, you'll be expected to be hearing from your special ed liaison over the next couple of weeks, and these plans will be sent out to you.
Great, thank you. All right, next slide. Flu vaccine. I know there's been a ton of questions. I've gotten a ton of questions around the flu vaccine. Full honesty, I didn't know that question. I didn't know that guidance was coming from the state last week. That was a surprise to me. So it wasn't something that the district had mandated. It is purely coming from the state. So again, the state mandated that all students in hybrid or remote learning models must be vaccinated for the flu vaccine. Documentation of the immunization needs to be submitted to your school nurse by December 31st of this year, 2020. Now, again, according to the state, vaccinating for the flu is important for several reasons. It reduces the risk of getting the flu, and in some instances, it reduces the severity. I think their thinking around this is that if there's some protection around the flu, they might be able to have a better understanding if a student has COVID or has some symptoms of COVID, because they do mirror themselves somewhat. There are exceptions that can be made or granted based on medical issues, and what you would need to do is get a written note from your doctor and submit it to your school nurse. Or religious exemptions can be granted. So what you'd have to do is a parent must attest in writing that the vaccine violates their religious beliefs, and then send that into our school nurse also, please. So again, not being mandated by the school district, but by the state. And again, we have to, follow those state regulations. And you have some opportunities for exemptions if you feel you need to do that. Just a quick little blurb about technology, because I've seen some questions, but also some stuff on Facebook that people have asked. So we've actually purchased more Chromebooks for our students. Unfortunately, right now there's a shortage, just like every other district that's trying to purchase more. We have our orders in, but they're back ordered. Hopefully sometime in October, could be November. This is something we're going to keep an eye on. But once we get those devices in, that's going to give us almost a full one-on-one model throughout the district, which is exciting. Some parents have asked, can you buy your own device? You absolutely can. You do not have to borrow one of our devices. There's a Chromebook is a Chromebook for the most sense. We only ask that you purchase the licensing fee that we have. It's $25. And that gives you the opportunity, gives kids the opportunity to access the license of our Google domain. And then they can use all the things that we have under Google. But there is no requirement to use our Chromebooks if you feel like you want to purchase your own. The other piece of the tech thing I want to talk about is it's so important that you, next week you're going to be getting an email from Family ID about filling out the paperwork that we typically do electronically. And our handbooks will be there. It's really, really important that you and your kids read the acceptable use policy. There's a lot of important information about using our technology in there. So please, please, please make sure you check that out. And this is Rafferty.
All right, so I would just like to share a little bit of information about what you can expect to see with synchronous and asynchronous learning, and make sure that we have a common understanding of both of these methods of delivery of instruction. So on this slide, what I've done is I've put the synchronous information in blue and the asynchronous information in red, because I wanted you to see sort of how we'll be dancing back and forth between the two modes of instruction. So synchronous learning is live, real time. The students and the teacher are engaged in content at the same time. So all students will have designated pre-scheduled times throughout the day, throughout the week, that they'll be engaged in synchronous learning with their teachers and their peers. Asynchronous learning is defined as content when students are engaged in content on their own time, at their own pace, through activities that are generated by the teacher. So whether the teacher records a video and posts it with an assignment that goes with it, or is posting activities through Seesaw, or using any of our online curriculum materials through McGraw-Hill, those would all be examples of asynchronous activities. So all students will have asynchronous activities to complete on their own time throughout the day and throughout the week. So students can expect to have or experience both synchronous and asynchronous experiences throughout the day. It's important for everyone to.
We lost you there, Mrs. Rafferty.
Am I still good to go?
There, you're back.
Okay, oh, I don't know what happened. So I was just saying there are times that we need to be able to provide instruction during the day, explain concepts, unpack information, and model instructional strategies. And when we think about this blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning, our teachers need to determine the best instructional approach. So for that reason, you're going to see this ongoing dance between the two approaches throughout the school day. So the teachers will be choosing activities that are best for in-person instruction, which are best for synchronous learning, and which are better suited for asynchronous. So I have a couple of examples of some models or some ways lessons periods through the day would go that I've listed here. So on this screen, you can see one example. Remote students might log into their Google Meet at 9 o'clock where their teacher's conducting a number corners lesson with the in-person cohort of students. The students would watch and interact with the lesson in real time with their class. And then when the lesson ends, they would log off. Students would then go into their Seesaw account and complete activities related to the number corner activity that they just watched synchronously. Another example for the older kids, you might have students log into their class at the start of a class period. Their teacher would lead a lesson, model a strategy, engage the group in a practice activity where they're applying the strategy. The teacher would be observing and gathering data on students to drive further instruction. The lesson would end, students would log off and complete perhaps a set of practice problems related to the lesson that was presented. And then they might log back on to the Google Meet at the end of the class for 5 or 10 minutes for a quick check-in with the teachers to have questions answered and for the teacher to be able to provide some feedback. But I think it's important for everyone to understand that it will be this dance back and forth between synchronous and asynchronous learning, and that's part of the work that teachers will be doing on Wednesday afternoons during their planning time is looking through their curriculum, looking through their materials and deciding which lessons are better suited for which of the different modes of delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marano.
You're welcome. Just a quick note on our food service. So the students are going to be back in the cafeteria, which is exciting. I think it's important for the kids to be able to eat in the caf and not in their classrooms. So safety precautions that Ms. Bell has put together for us. Floor markings will be placed as well as seating 6 foot apart to ensure social distancing. All school nutrition staff will wear face masks and shields and gloves along with plexiglass partitions at the serving lines and registers. All meals will be in closed containers with utensils and condiments provided, and the milk will be handed to students at the register. And new this year, student IDs will be provided to all students with a barcode on the back. So it's going to eliminate them having to punch in their PIN pads or their PIN codes. So that's going to make it a lot easier. We highly encourage you to apply for free and reduced meals if you feel you qualify. The 2021 applications will be available on our district website. Excuse me, along with we have a new online application that should be coming out soon. We'll still have some paper provided. We'll send those out with kids on the first day. But please understand that you have to reapply every year. Our office will process Ms. Bell's office will process it once it's received and notify you via mail. They're going to continue to provide breakfast and lunch to all remote learners, full-time or hybrid remote days. So please pick up Pickup service will be at BMS, just like it was in the spring, from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Mondays and Wednesdays. So if you qualify for free meals, you'll be provided one at no cost, and then regular rates will apply for reduced and full pay. And then she's going to be sending out more information in the coming days. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to our school-specific overview. I will turn it over to the principals. We start with our elementary group.
Great, I'll start. I'm Emily Larry. I am the principal at Stallbrook Elementary School. Mrs. Friedman, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
I'm Miriam Friedman, the principal at DePietro.
Great, and we created a few slides to give you some general information. We are going to provide those school-specific Zooms coming later, which will have more specific information for you. Just some general information. We created cohorts, so cohort A and cohort B. Generally, students with last names A through K were in cohort A. They'll be coming in person Monday and Tuesday. They will be remote Wednesday through Friday. And then students with last names L through M would be in person Thursday and Friday and be remote Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You are in these cohorts unless someone has reached out to you, usually the principal. But please note that in the spring, we did put students in classrooms. We assigned students to classroom teachers, and you all got that information at the end of the year. There may be some changes, so we will be informing you by September 4th if there'll be changes or not to your classroom teacher from the spring. Physical distancing and strategies, as well as supports. We will be teaching students about staying 6 feet apart, and we're going to use PBIS. You all know that PBIS is our reinforcement system. And we intend to create lessons for students to learn how to stay 6 feet apart, as well as how to advocate for themselves and all kinds of things around that. And we also have strategies and supports that are physically in our buildings, things like arrows in the hallway, so students know which direction they should be going, as well as those arrows are 6 feet apart, so students can tell when they're walking in the hallway if they're too close to one another.
Ms. Larry, can I just chime in for a second? So
Sure.
your cohorts are A through K and then L through Z, correct?
Oh, I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
Typo. Thank you.
All right, next slide.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Okay. So just to continue with the general information, all students K to 3 are required to wear a mask unless there's a medical excuse, for which we would have wanted to have a conversation with you in advance. If that's going to be a situation, we do ask that you reach out to us. The principal of either school or the school nurse can help as well, so that we can get that all taken care of and get that information taken care of. We will have mask breaks, sorry. We're coming up with protocols of what that looks like when we're taking the breaks. The teachers will have the opportunity to take students outside throughout the day. We'll also have our recess time, and be able to use outside spaces. And then finally, for recess with our outdoor classroom spaces, we will be separating the students by class so that we have those cohorts staying together, and we'll be working with students just on what's expected. Okay. There had been a question about this, and I know Mr. Marano answered it, but we're going into a little more detail. So this is just for your information. We're going to be posting this as well. All the schools are sharing their information, but this is what the beginning and the end of day looks like. So as Mr. Marano had said, there are staggered times, and we wanted to just point out. So for bus arrival, this is what the time frames are, because just remember, we're working with the other schools and we're the last school. So buses are planned to arrive from 8:35 to 8:45, and then parent drop off will take place from 8:45 to 8:55. We're going to go into more detail of school specific because we have different driveways and so forth. So we'll be sharing that next week. And then in the afternoon, we have student pickup from 2:40 to 2:50, and then 2:50 to 3 is bus loading. The one thing that we want to point out is that buses are always the priority. So when the buses are coming in or the buses are about to leave, we'll be stopping the other activities in order to accommodate that. So although this is what it says the times are, we may be looking for some flexibility based on what's happening with our buses.
Classrooms, we've gotten a lot of questions regarding what will our classrooms look like. As you can see, most of the extra material was removed from the classrooms to create more physical space for students. Desks are separated Much of the educational material that teachers need was taken out of the classroom and put in another space for them to access. And then anything that we didn't need right away, so things like mailboxes, communal spaces that students are going, large tables, that was all put in storage for when this is hopefully over and we can bring it all back in.
Okay, this is a picture of our cafeterias, our 2 different cafeterias, but as you can see, they're pretty much a similar setup. Our tables are being divided. And if you look in the second one, we put an example, both schools are going to be doing this. The X's are where we're placing students. So students will be sitting 6 feet apart. All students are facing the same direction. And then we'll also be giving students assigned seating. And the teachers will be working with the kids on that.
Mrs. Friedman, can I just answer one of the questions that came up in the chat regarding the Stahlberg desks? They are closer than the DePietro desks because we put them 3 feet apart and students will sit every other, where the DePietro desks, a few were removed. So students will still be 6 feet apart. It just might look a little bit different between the schools. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to schedules. So this is the example of, wait, were you gonna be doing this one? Sorry.
No, you were, but I can if you want.
No, sorry. I thought I was overstepping here. So this is an example of the hybrid model of what hybrid would look like. So as you can see, it's slightly changed just a little bit from what was shared out earlier, but what in-person learning will look like and then remote learning. So that's where we have the 2 columns. The students will be starting their day, and our remote learners will be joining in on the morning meeting and the past lesson of the day. Again, each of the schools are going to look slightly different. So Dr. Lurie and I will both be presenting what it'll look like at the schools, but for the most part, we're following this. Then we'll have, it won't necessarily be in this order, but there will be a 90-minute ELA block. And it shows, if you look at this, there are the 2 things: what will be happening when students are in person, and then what will be happening when they're remote learning. The big difference is the difference between, if you're thinking about what did remote learning look like in the fall versus what in the spring versus in the fall, is that we will be providing more direct instruction throughout the day. So that does mean that the students will need to log on and they'll need to engage with their teacher that's going to be doing those lessons. Then we'll make sure that we're integrating mask breaks and snack breaks and so forth, and then also providing it if students need to request a break, they'll be able to do that with us. And then we have a daily number corner. Those number corner lessons are that's our math. So that's going to be live for students, and there are potential various different things, but we'll always be making sure that another big difference is students, even if they're looking at a recording, so let's say they happen to be watching a recording, as long as they are doing it at the time that we have designated as a school, we will have remote teachers that are doing some sort of follow-up with them to check in, to make sure that they're understanding what's happening and do some check-ins. We'll have a 90-minute block. Again, we're focusing on the activities. They'll be doing more individual, a lot more. They'll be able to use their manipulatives and so forth with the in-person learning. And then similar to ELA, the students that are doing remote learning, so those opposite days, will have lessons and then be able to interact with an educator. And then this is just a sample, so then we're going to put in some more breaks. And from there, science and history, social studies blocks, very similar to the others.
There'll also be specials as well.
Correct. Yes. We just didn't put that into this. Sorry.
Mr. Marano, great. So this is the full remote schedule. It looks very similar to the remote schedule for the hybrid students. So these students will come in, they'll do their morning meeting, again, either live or with that remote teacher. Their ELA block will be a combination of, again, that interaction with a remote teacher, as well as some asynchronous activities. Those could be watching videos, doing independent activities, seesaw activities in Google Classroom as well. And again, it all falls pretty similarly with what Mrs. Friedman had said, science and social studies. Those are more independent learning activities. We move through, there's a lunch and a movement break. So just because kids are at home, we want to make sure that we're keeping a consistent scheduled for them. And then again, the daily number corner will either be live or in a small group with the remote teacher. Math will look very similar, and then the specials as well.
I think what I'd like to add too is there are some questions about the 90 minutes and needing to take breaks. When the students are remote, they will not be engaging in 90 full minutes of instruction or interaction with an educator. That's where the asynchronous activities will be brought in to play. So they will have that break. They'll have the time to do some independent work and then be able to touch back with the teacher.
Yes, it's very similar to what Mrs. Rafferty had just talked about, kind of bouncing back and forth. And our Zooms, they're on the same night. They will be obviously on Zoom. We will be sending those links out. It will be Wednesday, September 2nd at 6 p.m.
Mr. Marano, could I just wanted to interject for just a moment. I'm getting some questions in the private Q&A box that's asking whether or not we're answering questions. There are questions coming in fast and furious, and a couple of us are monitoring both boxes, so we are trying to work and to type as fast as we can, and I'm texting Mr. Garofano and trying to get some answers, and I'm texting with Mr. Roach for transportation trying to get some answers. So I just wanted all of you who are participating right now to let you know that we are trying to get to all of your questions in the chat box and the question and answer box to the best of our ability. Thanks.
What we'll do at the end, we'll take a little bit of time to see if we can answer some of these questions, and then whatever we can't get to, we'll kind of put into a document that we can send out later as like an FAQ. And then you'll also have those opportunities during the school-specific Zooms next week to ask some more questions.
Mr. Marano, would it be a good idea to maybe ask people to put their questions into one or the other so that we can monitor that one?
I think that's great. If people could put them in the chat feature, so I can see that they're going in the Q&A box, but I can't see it because I'm sharing my screen. But if you put it in the chat feature instead, that would be helpful. Okay, BMS, Mr. Cutler. Oh, we can't hear you, Mr. Cutler. You're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right, sorry. So good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Cutler. I'm the principal of BMS. Our setup, as you see in these photos, are similar to the elementary school in that the spacing is 3 feet. However, if you notice in the picture on the right where there's blue stickies on desks, they've been identified as the 6-foot distanced desks to meet the cohorts of no more at this time than 13 students per class. So to have half the class would be 13. So with that said, the nice part, and that sticky note, which we know will last about 3 seconds, will be made out of something that we're working on now with Mrs. Loftus, whether it be some sort of decal or what have you. So that way the custodial staff knows not only to sanitize everything, but really make sure that they're hitting the desks that are being utilized during the cohorts A and B. So that is what you're seeing now again is a 3-foot distance, but with us actually meeting the 6-foot distance by the separation of students. So thanks to Mr. Oakley and the superintendent and the Board of Health, some of the updated safety measures that we've adopted in the times of COVID. If you will draw your attention to the lower right side, there used to be a water fountain there. Many of the water bubblers, as we like to call them, have been removed and hand washing stations have been installed. And that is part of our actual, we call it the Healthy Hawks, and that's part of our actual daily schedule, which we'll get to at a later slide. For hand washing, making sure that everybody's keeping up with hygiene. As we show in the center, floors have been marked on the lower left-hand side, 6-foot distance, arrows for direction of travel, and staggered arrival and dismissal times, just like the elementary schools. And unfortunately, which was a real upset, especially for the young kiddos coming up from 4th grade, coming up to the 4th grade, who are excited to have lockers. This year, we will not be utilizing lockers as far as we can see because of the additional stuff to sanitize and places for germs to hide. So right now, there is no use of lockers. Next slide, please. Beginning of the day, 7:45 to 8 a.m. is student drop-off. and 8 a.m. to 8:10 is bus arrival. They're at different spots. So they should never, not only are they staggered, but they also should not have to compete with each other. In the afternoon, it's 2:10 to 2:20 is student pickup, and 2:20 to 2:30 is bus loading. Excuse me. Next. This is the 2020-2021 schedule, which I wish I could see the eyes of my wonderful counseling staff, guidance counseling staff, how many times we have, and Mrs. Rafferty, how many times we have changed this schedule to accommodate and meet everything. So we're at 60-minute blocks, and there is no more rotation. And as you see, the top header, each grade level is identified to account for their day. And I'm sorry, the 7th grade is the only, actually 6th and 7th grade are the only grades that have, teams of teachers as far as, one for each content area, where the 5th grade is set up in teams of 2, where each teacher, teaches a humanities teacher and a math and science teacher. And then 4th grade is self-contained. So that is the schedule for this school year. If you notice in the top column from 7:55 to 8:10, not to get involved or intertwine or intermingle with, or interrupt rather, with the academics, we have factored in the Healthy Hawks staggered arrival, so that won't mess up anything, and we'll make sure that everybody's able to do their hand washing routines, make sure everything is all cleaned and ready to go, and then we can jump right into academics. BMS, our Zoom question and answer is on scheduled, which will go out, the invite will go out tonight, is September 1st at 6 p.m. And both myself, Mr. Nurbon, our school nurse, counselors will all be on to answer any questions that you may have that weren't addressed here or that are specific to BMS. The other thing that we have coming, which I think all the principals do, is a survey for you to ask some specific questions that are based on our school versus Mr. Marano's district global PowerPoint. Cohorts at Bellingham Memorial School are A through K, in person Monday and Tuesday, L through M, in person Thursday and Friday.
L through Z.
Oh, thank you. L through Z. Okay. That would be a very small cohort. L through Z. So unless you have heard from either myself or one of my staff members directly from the office, you fall into one of those two categories at this time. As Mrs. Lawrence had touched upon, and as we're talking about phasing in and all the different needs of whether, what special ed students, go in, and what are the different criteria, that will all be phased in. So right now, everybody that's coming in knows that they're coming in. Physical distance strategies and support are arrows in the hallway and lunchroom, identifying direction and distance. We're currently set up to have banquet style tables 6 feet apart, and we have 58 students housed at 6 feet apart safely in the cafeteria, and the remaining lunch group is 6 feet apart, safely distanced in the gymnasium. All students are required to wear a mask unless medically excused, which would be something to go through Mrs. Loftus about. Mask breaks are within the classroom, but as we discussed with all the different grade level teams today, we really are going to, and I think one of the questions really touched upon it, mask breaks as much as possible are going to be outside, whether it be in the courtyard area, which we have 2 of, outside during recess time, which the 4th and 5th grade still maintains, and they schedule that based on their own. It's time to go outside at recess, which I think I saw a little question pop up on the bottom about recess. There is recess. The teams are working together to make sure that they are not going out all at once. So there's plenty of room and able to have social distancing. That will also be one of the mask breaks. So, and again, recess outdoor classroom space is separated by the classes. And because we have such a great group of professionals in district, they are able to manage that without having to necessarily schedule at every day. They will take their 25-minute recess at such and such a time.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mrs. Lafayette.
All right, here we go. So I was going to touch on just a couple things that came up in the questions before I jumped in. So sanitizing classrooms came up. What's the schedule? How are we sanitizing the building? So all of the building principals have met with our custodial staff and we've come up with sanitizing plans. So we've worked with our custodians to say, yep, we realize that these are your daily tasks that you've always had to do. But in addition to that, we need manpower to go through the building throughout the day to sanitize high-touch surfaces and also bathrooms. So all of that work has been done, and we've worked with our custodians. So they are sanitizing throughout the day above and beyond what would be done in a typical season, high-touch areas, doorknobs, things like that. We're also asking our teachers to sanitize classrooms when they can. So at the high school specifically, in between classes, the teachers will be sanitizing the desks and the doorknobs, any sink areas that they might have in their rooms. So we're all very concerned about keeping the school sanitized. So we've developed plans to make sure that that's happening. One of the things was asked about the Wednesday schedule. So Wednesday is our remote day, but we will have at the high school level live instruction following a typical half-day schedule. So teachers will be interacting with their students in a live interactive mode until 10:45 at the high school, and then they'll be given work to do independently. So students will then work independently for the rest of the day while we have time for our teachers to collaborate and plan and make sure that we're staying current in all our curriculum. And the other principals are following a similar model. One of the questions that's come up a couple times is, what do you do when tech fails? So it may happen, right? So we have all worked in education long enough to know that sometimes tech fails, and that's okay. So our school, at the high school, will be relying on Google Classroom, so assignments will be there. So it's not as though if tech fails or live streaming doesn't work or there's a glitch that the students will have nothing to do. Our teachers have always had backup plans. They've always done a great job doing things like that and having a backup plan, so they'll continue to do so. We're also spending the first 10 days working through our technology and practicing with it so that our teachers are ready to live stream their classes as needed. So those were the things that came up in the question and answer that I wanted to just take a minute to answer. Our safety measures are very much like what Mr. Cutler talked about. So we have the hand washing stations that were added. We are not using water fountains, so we're doing the bottle fill stations instead. We recognize that students need access to water, so they'll be able to drink water throughout the day. In one of our previous Zooms, we talked about how they would just move their mask to the side and drink water. One of the biggest changes at the high school, and this was done for safety reasons, is that we have reduced the number of courses that will happen in a day at the high school. So last year we would have had 6 periods per day. This year we're going to have 4 periods per day. So we've created a block schedule at the high school for a number of reasons. The first reason is that there would be fewer passing times, so students would be in the hall less. And then the other reason was that students and teachers would have fewer interactions. So with the hybrid schedule and the block schedule, a teacher would interact with approximately 36 students a day, and the students would be in classrooms with 12 peers, 4 different periods. So we needed to make that decision about our master schedule based on safety and making sure that people were having less contact with fewer people, if that makes sense. We have our desks 6 feet apart. You can see the picture down below. There our desks are. We're doing staggered arrival and dismissal. We are not using lockers. So I saw that come up in the chat. So will students have a backpack with all of their things in it? Yes. But with the 4 classes and with the Chromebooks, we're hoping that they won't have 4 heavy textbooks in their backpack. They may have a big history book, a novel, and a Chromebook. We are not using the locker room, so we still will have PE class, but students will not be changing for PE. They'll be participating in what we call their street clothes, and they should wear sneakers. And any sort of physical education in the beginning of the school year will take place outside, weather permitting, or spaced out more than 6 feet apart in the gymnasium with masks on. And again, it would be things that they could do in their street clothes. So things like yoga, meditation, walking. So they're not going to do any contact sports. I think that's it for that slide. All right, at the beginning and end of the day, so just like the other schools, we're doing staggered arrival and dismissal. It's important to note that the buses are coming in first and parent drop-off doesn't start until 7:30. That also means that our drivers, who probably will appreciate this, do not have to be at school until 7:30 as well, so they get to an extra 10 minutes there. We did this so that we have fewer kids in the hallway getting to first period, and we need to make sure that the buses are a priority because we're the first stop in the morning, so we need the kiddos off our bus, we need the buses sanitized, and then they go pick up other kids in the district. Similarly, in the afternoon, bus pickup is at 1:50, and then parents and drivers will be dismissed at 2 o'clock. All right, so here's a picture of what that block schedule looks like. And I'll share it more when we have our school specific, but you'll see that students will still have, we'll actually end up having 8 classes throughout the high school year. 4 of those classes will take place first semester, and 4 of those classes will take place second semester. I just saw that. We will receive schedules on September 5th. So we'll release them to School Brains on September 5th. So you can see first semester, we're running periods A, B, C, and G, and then second semester, D, E, F, and G. And so what I put on the screen in front of you is just what a typical student might have for a schedule. I think we'll get there. Let's see, lunch changes. So we'll have 4 different lunches. And there's our indoor seating. You can see the picture there, and we are adding desks outside. So we think that we can fit up to 30 desks outside so that weather permitting, students can sit outside and eat their lunch. Previously, this had been a senior privilege. We're gonna open it and extend it to all of our students. So that's will help us to accommodate more kids outside and fewer kids eating inside. Everybody has to be seated facing the same direction, and the desk will be sanitized in between lunches. We're also putting QR codes on the desks, so students will have to scan in and let us know which cafeteria desk they're sitting at for any contact tracing. All right, this is an important one, and again, I think one that the students will like. If a junior or a senior have study hall, again, this used to be a senior privilege, but now we're extending it to juniors as well. They do not have to be in study hall first period. And if they have study hall last period, they do not have to stay in the building for study hall. All of those things involve parent permission. So if you have a junior or senior, expect to see that permission slip pretty early on. They're very good about getting that form signed so that they can leave the building and not have to be in study hall in our building. The student cell phone policy is really important. So I guess I have good news and then bad news for the students. We are not allowing the students to use their cell phones during the school day, during class at all. So in the past, we've said they could have them, and if the teacher allowed them to, they could look some information up on their phone, or they could listen to music while they're working. We are not allowing that this year. We recognize that we're going to be using so much of our bandwidth on streaming classes and reaching out to remote students and hybrid students that there's no way that we can allow student cell phones also on our network, also going on YouTube or playing games or doing any of those things. If there's an emergency and they have to make a phone call, absolutely, they can just communicate that with their teacher, but their phones need to be away during class time. They will need to use their cell phone in the cafeteria for that contact tracing form, but we're gonna just see how that goes in the cafeteria and make sure that our bandwidth can accommodate that.
Can I just interject real quick? Mr. Garofano sent me a text. He's our tech director, and he's working right now, I believe, the next few days. He's going to be doubling the internet capacity and other network enhancements to improve the remote experience. So that's why it's so important for kids to make sure their cell phones are put away and that they have their Chromebooks, especially at the high school, where they can do all the things they need to do for their learning. So we're going to expand the amount of Wi-Fi capabilities so that the kids who are remote still have a great experience also. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so these are some of the questions that came in. Will the high school kids have the same schedule they signed up for in the spring? So yes, we could do that with core classes just like any other year. So even though we changed the master schedule so students only have 8 courses, we could still get them in their English, math, science, history, world language, and AP classes. So that all worked out. If there was a conflict in your schedule, a school counselor will be reaching out to the student in the next week by the very latest. Many of these conflicts were taken care of in June, so we should be okay there. There might be a handful. Just like any year, elective requests are requests. We cannot guarantee that students will get into the elective that they want. So we did the best we could to get them in the elective they wanted, but if we couldn't, we did put them in classes that they had not taken previously, and that's for electives. Will AP classes be honored? Yes. So because we switched over to the block schedule, we were able to keep our AP classes intact. So that worked out for us. AP work is due by the first day of class. I know some people have asked about that. Students know who their AP teacher is because that's something that doesn't change year after year. And we did have the AP presentation in early March, so they can reach out to specific AP teachers with questions about that. Will students be able to meet with their counselors for college planning? Yep, absolutely. We're doing in-person and virtual if needed. I'm not sure on the PSATs at this time. I do know that the high school is no longer a testing site for the September SATs. Wednesday remote, I did talk about that. There is a schedule. Each period will meet for a short live session and students will then do work independently. Then number 6 is really important. Will students in cohort A and B be in the same class live streaming? Yes. So what we will do is the cohort A students, say it's a Monday, are in class with the teacher, and then the teacher can turn on their Chromebook and do live streaming so that the cohort B students have access to the class. And the same goes for all of our students who chose full remote. So those students will get their schedule on the September 5th, and they'll see which teacher they have each period. They'll get information on that Google Classroom, and they will stream into those classrooms and complete the work on Google Classroom. All right, our Zoom is Monday, August 31st. The link for that Zoom will be going out tonight. And also, like the other principals, I have a form. So if you have specific questions for the high school, put that in the form and we'll make sure that we answer all those questions.
Mrs. Lawrence.
Thank you. Good evening. Keough Memorial Academy is going to run on a modified hybrid model. The reason for that is because the Keough Memorial Academy is specifically a Department of Education, special education approved day school, and they have some specific guidelines that have to apply to a school that is licensed to service only students with significant special needs. So the Keough Memorial Academy will be running 4 days of in-person instruction, Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Wednesday will be remote. And as at the high school, that remote learning day would follow the half-day schedule with some live instruction and then activities and work and assignments to be conducted by the students independently for the remainder of that school day. Our arrival and dismissal times have not really changed that much. We have a small population of students, but what we are going to do is we're going to stagger the kids as they start to enter into the building. The buses come from all different towns outside of Bellingham, and they usually arrive at various times, but they're all usually in the district by 8:25. So as each out-of-town bus comes in, those 1 or 2 students will be allowed in, then the next bus will be allowed, all the students will be dismissed from the bus, and the same way will be conducted for dismissal going out. The children that are riding buses will be called first, and they'll enter 1 bus at a time, and then the student or parent pickup will come, and then students that drive themselves will be dismissed. Again, students are going to be required to wear masks on the bus. There won't be allowed to be any eating or drinking on the buses, and students will wash and or sanitize their hands upon entering the building. We do have hand washing stations and hydration stations that have been installed at Keogh Academy. At dismissal, they'll do that same process before they enter onto the bus or be dismissed into their parent or their own cars. The classroom materials and devices, all students are going to be issued a Chromebook for their individual use during in-person and remote learning days for the duration of the school year. The expectation is that they'll be handed their Chromebook when they arrive on the first day of school, and they'll be taking that Chromebook home with them back and forth each day. They're going to be responsible to charge them. Previously, we had charging stations where we collected all the students and charged them en masse. That will not be the case this year. Once a Chromebook is assigned to a student, that will be for their individual use. And we're encouraging our families to purchase the Chromebook insurance, and more information will be provided when we have our specific school Zoom night. There will not be any sharing of materials, and all individual materials will be issued to each student. And here is a copy of our schedule. We are moving to a 54-minute block, and the children are going to be stationary for a few of their classes, and the teachers will move in between each classroom. And we're trying to minimize the transitions from one room to another. And you can see that we're going to be running the 6 periods per day. We're going to have a morning break, and that will be split up into 2 periods to minimize the number of students in the cafeteria area. And we'll also be running 2 lunch periods to minimize the number. And all of the equipment and all the desks and all the tables have been configured to be 6 feet apart. Mr. Marano?
Yep.
And our Zoom meeting is scheduled for September 3rd at 6 p.m. And as the other principals advised, we'll be sending that Zoom link out with a form to provide if you want to add any additional questions specific to your students attending KMA. And we look forward to, meeting all up with you again on the 3rd.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Lawrence.
You're welcome.
All right, so let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, so let's see if we can just spend a few minutes trying to answer some questions. I know that I saw a couple. One question I saw, a couple actually, about why did Bellingham choose the hybrid model? I know there's some communities that have chosen to go full remote. So I can't speak to specifics why another district might have gone full remote. I do know that the districts that have chosen to go full remote are phasing students in to the hybrid model pretty quickly within the first couple of weeks. So Franklin, for example, is starting full remote 2 weeks after their start date. They're starting to bring in kids K-3, I believe, and then continue to move up. By sometime early November, they'll have all students in their buildings. It comes down to space. It comes down to building cohorts. Some districts are larger, so it's more difficult to build those cohorts and keep the 6-foot distancing. And also, I think, we look at our positivity rate in our town, in our community. So when we looked at all those factors for us, we felt it was good for us to try to go for the hybrid model, and it's worked out so far in building cohorts and keeping the distancing. Other communities I've seen are doing the same hybrid model. And then there are actually some that are going full in-person for K-3, Blackstone, for example. So each district has their own kind of process in making those decisions through their school committee. We chose the hybrid model and, work through that process. Mrs. Rafferty, there was another question that popped up that we wanted to address.
Yes, there were some questions about our plans for meeting the social emotional needs of our students, considering the challenging times that they're having to deal with.
Yeah, so we recognize that some of our kids could really have struggled through this time, and you know, it hasn't been easy. So we've hired additional adjustment counselors at the high school and at Memorial School, and we do have adjustment counselors at each elementary school. So I think that if you have concerns for your child, please reach out to your principals. That sound good, guys? Reach out to your principal, and they can help you connect with the adjustment counselor to help, you know, that transition back to school in the hybrid model, or if you have some questions or concerns while they're in the remote model. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mrs. Friedman.
I think, Mr. Marano, it's okay for them to contact the counselors directly now since we're all back.
That's fine too. Yep. All right, can we try a couple more? Again, make sure you're putting your questions in the chat, not in the Q&A, please.
I was typing, but I can just answer. Someone just asked about band. So how will that take place given the conditions that we're in? So band and chorus music classes were given specific guidance from DESE about instrument play and singing. And so our director of band, but she has a different title than that. Our fine arts director has read through all of the guidance and has changed curriculum as needed. So she's all over that, and we'll make sure that the students are still learning about music, but maybe not necessarily playing instruments in the building.
This is a question, it's in the Q&A. There's been unanimous pushback from educators across the state against these hybrid models. Do educators in Bellingham support a hybrid model? When do you get to hear their perspective? So I have worked with our teachers union, actually our staff, to, you know, as we went through the process of going to this hybrid model. If you recall, we started our reentry team with 160 people, which were administrators, parents, and staff, to kind of work through the models. So they've been involved through the process. I can tell you today, I went to every school. I tried to touch base with almost every teacher in the building. So yes, there's some nerves, and rightfully so. There's some anxiety there, but they're also really excited to be back and to see your kids. And I think we've done a really, really good job putting together all of the PPE, the personal protective equipment, the hand washing stations, the sanitizing product that we use to, you know, try to mitigate any issues that could come up. And again, having those cohorts be so small, I think it's going to be really beneficial. So our teachers union has been phenomenal through this process. I know other districts it's been difficult, but we've really partnered and done what's right for our students and put them first. So I appreciate everything that we've done together as a group. Sorry, I'm going between the two Q&A and the chat. There was a question on if somebody tests positive. I've had a couple of those questions today, actually. So we're going to follow the guidance that the Department of Ed and CDC have given us. There's a couple of different layers to this. So if someone is, you know, presumed or had exposure to the virus and has been in school, you know, that student in that class probably will be quarantined. The teacher, if they're asymptomatic, they can continue to work through the remote process. If a student tests positive, then we've got to consider, you know, what's the exposure within the building? Do we need to shut the building down and go full remote? So there's a lot of different layers. I think we have to take it case by case. We've been working, our lead nurse, Mrs. Loftus, has been phenomenal in providing guidance around this. And again, working with our Board of Health. So I can't stress enough, really, really important that if your child is sick, have them stay home. right? And what we can do also is if they stay home and they're not feeling well, they can access through remote learning. Just you need to let us know that they're going to be home and we can connect them to some remote learning so they're not missing anything. But please make sure they stay home if they're not feeling well. And we'll continue to do our best to monitor the metrics within the town. And if something does happen, we will follow the proper procedures. Shout out to all the school nurses. They're unbelievable. They are so amazing. We're very fortunate to have the nurses that we have. They've been phenomenal. I keep asking Mrs. Loftus to check my blood pressure, but she refuses. She said I'm gonna break her machine. What else we can do one more question? Is there one more in there that has come up a few times?
The one thing there are lots of very building specific questions coming up. So maybe if each of the building principals could just one more time share when they're having their information session so that the families that are asking some of those very building specific questions know that they have an opportunity to log on to those building sessions.
Do you want me to just share that out now, or do you want that?
Sure, that'd be great.
So we have and Mrs. Lafayette, you can tell me if we're wrong, but on Monday, August 31st is going to be the the high school meeting at 6 o'clock. On Tuesday, that's September 1st, will be the memorial school at 6 o'clock. And Mr. Cutler, you can tell me if I'm wrong. And then on Wednesday at 6 o'clock will be the Zoom meeting for the elementary schools. And Dr. Lurie and I will both be sending you the links to our own families through a BC5. I believe we're all going to be sending the links through BC5.
Mrs. Friedman, as a matter of fact, most of them just went out now because it's 7:09. So I heard a massive amount of emails going off, and they were us. So
we had scheduled that all to go out at 7 o'clock.
So at this point, what we're going to do, I'm going to save the chat questions that came up, and I'll make sure I share that with the principals. And then we can follow up with an FAQ, but also they have an opportunity to answer some during their sessions. If you have some specific questions about preschool, please reach out to Mrs. Furman, and then she can help answer some of those. I did see some questions there. One more quick thing, I got a text on this one. So for your kids that are riding the bus, hold on one second, let me go back to it. Oops. We're going to be providing clips that attach to their lanyards, and these clips are to hold their mask during lunch, a snack lunch and mask breaks. So that's a good tip I wanted to send out to everybody. I want to thank Mrs. Rafferty, Mrs. Lafayette, Dr. Lurie, Mrs. Lawrence, Mrs. Friedman, and Mr. Cutler for participating tonight and jumping in and answering as many questions as they could. I'm sure we didn't answer everything. We did get a good amount of questions. We'll continue to do these sessions, again, building specific, and then, if we need to, we can have another one of these sessions, before school starts. But please, continue to reach out to us, continue to ask questions. We're here to help. I feel really confident that we're going to have a great start to the year, and looking forward to seeing kids back in our buildings. I know they want to come back, and I know our teachers are looking forward to it. So we're excited. Thank you all for participating tonight, and have a great night. Stay safe and stay healthy.